Hello, fellow self-reliance folks. I am Tara, and today we're going to talk about and learn how to grow plants indoors over the winter. A lot of folks will grow herbs indoors, maybe start their tomato seeds indoors about February, perhaps even have a few windowsill containers for lettuce. There's so much more you can do, even if you have a small space or poor lighting. Our home used to be a hunting lodge. It had no windows till right before we bought it, and the windows in it are small. Ideally, you want a large window which gets great sun and southern exposure. We don't have that here. Windows in the living room areas are surrounded by hillsides. So if I can grow successfully indoors, and believe me, I do not have anything close to a green thumb, so can you. Now, what you're going to need first, and we had the instruction video about how to hang it, is your indoor grow light. And I'm going to add another one to this table. If you cannot use just regular light bulbs, they don't produce the same type of light as the sun, and you need to mimic that as much as possible with the ebbs and flows and the type of rays. A 400-watt grow bulb will be able to grow plants in about an 8x8 space if you have some light from outdoors, like my light here, my window would be. It gets great morning sun, but it doesn't get really good afternoon sun. And when you're trying to gauge where to put your garden and how much light the window gets, you really need to look at it during different points of the day, the morning, the afternoon, the late afternoon, to judge how the light is going to flow. But if you didn't have very much light, one 400-watt grow bulb will do an 8x8 area. If you got a little bit of light, a 5x5 area. If you got a little bit of light, it'll do an 8x8. So it gives you about a ballpark idea. This is just a standard, thinking it's a 6-foot long folding table, banquet table. And I want to be able to grow almost all the vegetables that we would need during the winter months indoors, just to eat on a regular meal basis for a family of 2 with our daughter and son-in-law and grandkids coming over, so that would make us 7. I'd have plenty to add side dishes to meals, besides what we have preserved. In just this little space, you can grow a lot in a compact space. You can grow tomatoes indoors. I'm going to try green beans for the first time this year. It's possible to grow about anything indoors, but you have to choose your light source well. Tomatoes, choose the right variety. A cherry, a pear, a grape type tomato is going to do better. You can also choose a pot like this one here, the bigger pot, and a dwarf, a typical tomato. So those are some of the things that you can grow. You just have to have the right setup with the light and your hanging lights. People even grow in closets. That takes a lot more light and some more humidity issues, and we'll get to humidity in a minute. But first we'll start with maximizing your space and your setup. I'll give you a little bit of a long scan here, my typical little folding table. It said it's only about 6 feet long, and I'm using a hodgepodge of different types of pots. And if I just used all big or all small and then you can transplant, but there's really no need because you're going to grow and harvest. As long as you can start some seeds in a little seed tray, but you'd be better off so you can not have to give them so much trauma, and just start your seeds in a smaller container, if I can get it out, like this one that you can hold in your hand. I'm going to go ahead and start my cherry tomato plants in here. They'll be a little bit dwarfed, but they will be fine. Just one seed in here grows a nice little plant, but you can put multiple. I put my hand on here to give you some size difference. Multiple onions in it. You can do some lettuce in it. You can definitely do carrots. You can just grow. It would be better to grow a smaller amount of seeds in a smaller pot so you can get more on your table and not have to cause trauma in this artificial environment with transplanting. But if you have a whole different types of pots, you can fit them in little by little, and it makes it nice with rotating, because that's one of the drawbacks of growing indoors, is that your plants might need varying types of sunlight. Some might need to be what they call a long day plant, where it really flourishes the most when they get 14 to 18 hours of sunlight, which is really hard to get in our area even in summer. Some like more like 10 to 13, or the typical 8. 8 would be what you'd be striving for in an indoor environment, to get enough sun during the winter months, even run your artificial lights. If it's an 8 plant that needs 8 to 10 hours, you're going to have the most success, because after the sun goes down, you'll be relying solely upon your artificial light, which is great, but it's not as great as natural sunlight. So I try to stick with vegetables and herbs that can live on an 8 to 10 hour sunlight day. You can do flowering, fruiting plants indoors. Tomatoes self-pollinate. When you get into fruiting plants, you're going to have to do artificial pollination. It works. I've known people that are much better gardeners than myself that do it, but it's a lot more bother than what I'm willing to do, so I've not tried that. And when you have these pots, when you're buying these, I just pick up whatever kinds that I find on sale. It's October now, and I hit end of season sales. You can do that, you know, in the fall, and they're putting things on clearance. A $6 pot cost me 80 cents. That's a great way to make your gardening much more economical. Or you can go ahead and make some felt ones out of fabric and sew those. Felt, nylon, you know, anything like that. Burlap, painter's canvas, all those things can make some great natural planters. But when you get these pots, whether you're paying a good price or a cheap price like I did, expect them to come without holes drilled in them. You're going to drill holes for drainage, and get you can put down from Dollar Tree like the plain baking sheets. I've done that before because the water's going to drip out, get on your table, and go everywhere. So these nice little plasticky tray things, they typically sell, at least in our area, 3 for $1 for the smaller ones, and the larger ones for these size pots are $1 a piece. But again, I hit an end of season summer sale, and I got them all for about a nickel or a dime a piece. And you should be able to get several years use out of them before they really crack up and aren't any good. So you need to put these under your pots. And sometimes these are wider than your pot. So when you're planning out your space, just like you would with an outdoor growing area, you need to put your little water catchment things underneath your pot and see how much that takes more space and diameter from the bottom, and it makes it a little bit more difficult to nestle some of these next to each other. So you need to always check when you're doing your spacing how many pots you can fit and how many strainers you can fit. To save space, you could try the cheap baking sheets like I was talking about. So the first thing you're going to do, as I mentioned, is pick your spot, get the best light that you can, best natural light, and get your artificial light hung up. And then you're going to take all the pots you're going to be using, and you're going to put them on your table like I did. And that's going to show you how many gallons, half gallons, quarts, whatever you're doing, or combination, that you're going to have a growing space. Only then can you really kind of divvy up what you're going to be able to grow in quantity. If you want to grow, you know, 4 or 5 things of lettuce, carrots, kale, cauliflower, even peppers. You can do almost anything indoors that you can do outdoors if you have the space and either the window with decent light, or you're going to invest in enough grow lights. Now, to enhance my growing space in here, I also use this wood ledge here, and I use the windowsill. And in those I can put some little cups with onions. You get a little Dixie cup, and you can grow a single onion in each one of them. So that's making use of that tinky tiny little bit of space up there. And on this shelf, I put some kind of window box, rectangular sized containers, and I can grow lettuce all back of there. And so that maximizes your growing space. In the same setup where you're going to water, you're going to check humidity levels, where you have your grow lights. So you can squeeze little things in, just like if you're dealing with a small backyard. If you're a suburban or especially an urban homesteader, that's something you need to deal with all the time. It's no different indoors. Now these containers are rather unique, and I like these. I got 2 sets from Amazon a year ago, and I think it cost me like $20-some a set. So these are stackables, and right now I've not cleaned them out. I'm going to take them out and turn them, put some good compost in. This is left over from grandchildren doing their own little urban flower garden. But what is so wonderful about these, that one is not going to be good for an example. I'll get 2 that will do this. These are stackables. And these are great if you're growing something like onions or beets or potatoes. You can grow potatoes indoors, or garlic, which is what I'm going to plant in them later. You can stack them like that, which you lose the middle growing space, and you do get shadow coming down from the outside of it. When you're growing something that doesn't need as much light, these are also great for carrots. You can grow up instead of out, which will increase, you know, the amount that you can grow even in a small table space. And because these are going to contain vegetables and do not need that much light, I'm going to put them on the edge of the table where they're getting some broadcasted light from my grow lights. and they're getting some natural sun, but they're not soaking up a lot of prime real estate here beneath this grow light and the one that's going to go up. You can stack them as tall as your window. That would make them hard to water, and tend to, but I would suggest going only as high as what you can see and water easily instead of climbing up and down. But, excuse me, that is up to you. Now, there's several things you really need to consider when you're planting your indoor garden. I'm going to move this out of the road here. This was an outdoor plant that I brought inside because it's still going strong, and so that's awesome. We're going to bring it in. You need to be concerned about humidity. That is the hardest thing to regulate. Sunlight is not that difficult. You got your artificial and the best real you can get. But humidity, if your homestead has a fireplace or a wood stove, which is how we heat ours, you already know all the dry heat that you have to deal with during the winter time. And you can tell if it is affecting your plants, if they're starting to get brown on the leaves, they're curling under, getting wilted. These got left outside when we got a little bit too cold of an evening. But it actually will look something similar to this. You've seen your plants in the summer when there's a drought going on, and that will give you an idea of what it looks like. It's just too dry and too hot. And my best sun is a lot closer to the wood stove than what I would like. That I can't change. So to help increase the humidity and get rid of the dry heat, what you can do, there's several things. You can put a pan with some lava rock on your table, and that will help give you a bigger space for evaporation, and it goes more quickly. And that'll put some more humidity into the air around your plants, but by doing that, you'll be losing some of your table space. You can also put your plants very close together. That's not much of an aha moment because you're going to squeeze as much in as what you possibly can. So that does create like a little mini microenvironment that is going to help them share the humidity. But what I do is I make a pseudo greenhouse. I don't build or do anything, but you could do that. You want to put up some supports on either side of your table and drape some plastic over it. You can go that route. But what I do is I mist them, and I tend to overwater or underwater, so misting them I really started doing just so I wouldn't kill what I was growing. When I'm growing outdoors, I'm much better. I put them out there, let God take care of them, stuff usually grows. When I start intermingling, that's when we have issues. And so if you put them on your table, they're already going to be close together. Get you a squirt bottle. I've got a couple from the Dollar Tree. And put water in it, lukewarm. You don't want it to be hot. You don't want it to be cold and cause any shock to your plants. No matter what the temperature is, you don't want to try to force too much of a temperature change on them. But if you just go by daily and mist them from the top down. And unless you have a plant like Landsea or something with a really furry leaf, you can mist those, but mist them much more lightly because it'll take longer for the water to evaporate, which could cause some plant disease. Not ever had happen, but it could. But if you mist them, and then all the heat that's in your room and dry heat, it's going to make its own little greenhouse effect and add a lot more humidity. I've never had any type of humidity gauge in here with them. Be a good idea. You might want to do that if you're struggling with getting humidity right when you're growing indoor during the winter, because you will have a lot of dry heat. Even if you use an electric furnace or gas furnace, in the wintertime you're going to have that cranked up. Ideally, the temperature for them to grow in indoors would be 65 to 75 degrees, a little hotter for seedlings. I don't know that's ever been as cool as 60, 75 in my house in the winter. I like it warm, but liking it warm and then squirting them does make my little mini greenhouse. That's how I argue with my husband that it's okay to have the wood stove cranked up like we're in the Caribbean. So these are just some different pots you can use. So we've gone over the light and how to create humidity and what plants you can grow. Much more detail about that in the article. The other thing you're going to need to watch out for is bugs. You wouldn't think bugs would develop in your house in December and January and February, but they will. Don't know how, don't know where they come from, but you will have to deal with some of the same bugs you do with growing outdoors. The bad thing about that is you're not going to have the good bugs to help eat the bad bugs. White flies, various types of mites, and that's something you don't want on your plants, and you also don't want them flying around your house. So you're going to need to keep a good watch. I do a daily inspection. It doesn't take very long. Go over, do your squirting, look at each plant, make sure there aren't any signs that there's any bug infestation. You'll see the white flies, as tiny as they are, they kind of do a little shadowy thing when they get beneath your grow lights. And they like the grow light, which is another good way to find where they are. I have an all-natural insect repellent and some natural fertilizers and insecticides all here on New Life on a Homestead. You can browse around, and I'll try to remember to link to some of them in the article. And those are things you can squirt safely indoors, even in confined space, windows closed, children, pets. They're all natural and organic. So you want to keep an eye out for white flies and other mites, any signs of plant disease or infestation, just like when you're outdoor growing. The only other winter growing tip indoors I can give you for growing your vegetables and your herbs, try fruit if you want to. It's just too intimidating for me to attempt to do that. Is hardening them off. You do not want to take even established plants outdoors until it's at least 50 degrees in daytime temperatures and close to that at night. In our area, we're in growing zone 6 in the Midwest, and you could get a frost up until early May. So just kind of gauge how you normally would plant your spring flowers outdoors. That's when you can take them out, but you need to start hardening them off at least 10 days before. You want to start watering them a little bit less, turn the light off a little bit, have the light on a little bit fewer times during the days. Even if you only have not much sun like I do, you still want to start turning it off, getting them used to hardening up and dealing with their more natural environment. You do not want to take them outside when they're at least a bit wet, so do not do any spritzing the day of moving them. The day before you decide to move them, I would do it earlier in the day so you know they're completely and thoroughly dried. And I would suggest putting a little bit of mulch or extra compost, not only in the hole where you're going to plant them outside. If you've decided they're still growing, that's great. I'm going to put them outside and keep them growing. Put a little bit of compost. And have to be warmed. I mean, you don't have to heat your compost. Put it in your garage or something like that and let it get a little bit warmer than the ambient temperature in the bottom of the hole. Put your plants in and then go ahead and fill about 1/2 to 1 inch, maybe even up to 2 inches around it, and a little bit of mulch. That's going to help protect them from the shock of the new environment that they're in. You don't have to replant them outside. You can go ahead and finish off eating them. But if you still have plants growing and you no longer want to have your house looking like a winter garden and you're ready to embrace spring, by all means take them out, harden them off, and you already have your spring garden started.